I wanted to check in because Christmas and the break and the new year and everything is a great time to kind of reset. And for me, what I like to do, as well as catch up with family and drink too much and eat too much and not go to the gym and get fat again, and then really actually have to go to the gym and feel motivated to do so at Christmas, is I like to binge shows that either have new content out, like we're going to talk about What If later on, or shows that I might have missed throughout the year. So I want to catch you up on some of the shows that have caught my eye since we last spoke in December. First thing I want to touch on is Slow Horses Season 3. And for me, Season 3 of Will Smith's adaptation of Mick Herron's spy novels took the show from a really fun diversion with kind of likable, well acted characters and an always interesting plot to being one of the best shows on television and absolutely essential viewing. Seriously, if Slow Horses isn't in your rotation and you're looking for something to watch, get on it right now. It's on Apple TV. This is a triumph for Apple's format of not relying on kind of big IP content. Granted, this is adapted from novels, but again, it's not kind of the big kind of superhero led kind of stuff that a lot of other providers are relying on. And instead, it's kind of curating fun experimental stories and then drafting in a combo of well cast A-list as well as homegrown actors blended to kind of make it all work. Gary Oldman's Jackson Lamb in this is maybe for me the most fun character on all of TV today. But all of the cast, from Jack Lowden's River Cartwright downwards, know exactly who they're playing and why it works. And the chemistry is absolutely crackling at all times, which makes even the quieter scenes really enjoyable. It's at the same time totally gripping without ever taking itself too seriously either, and making for an excellent watch and one that I want as many people as possible on the bandwagon for. And what I love most perhaps about the show is that it can pretty much genre hop and become whatever version of spy thriller that it actually needs to be. So while season 1 was more of a traditional mystery spy show, last season we had a more kind of sensational hijack plot, while season 3 was more balls to the wall action with a bit of mystery in there as well. But because the scripting is so clever and the character work and chemistry of all involved was so engaging at the same time, no matter what hat this show wears, and Smith has indicated, by the way, that they'll continue to experiment with that into season 4, the show continues to work and remain the same show without ever feeling compromised. Again, cannot recommend Slow Horses enough. If you haven't jumped on the bandwagon, get in time for season 4. You will not regret it. Another show that has been released over the Christmas and that I've been getting into is series 1 of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, which is airing on Disney every Wednesday currently. I was never a real Percy Jackson fan. I'm a big Harry Potter fanboy. Not so much J.K. Rowling these days, but that's another discussion which I've had before. But to me, this, from a distance, and it might be an unfair observation that I had, it felt a little bit like Harry Potter fanfic kind of capitalizing on the latter's success. But I'm happy to say that maybe I was wrong. I think, you look at the title Percy Jackson and the Olympians, it does follow the Harry Potter naming format. So I'm sure they have had some inspiration from it and the success of it. But again, it does justify itself when you get into it. The show, more than Harry Potter, which for me was really interested in kind of contrasting the wizarding world that it displayed with bumping up against our own world and kind of showing a lot of the comedic kind of elements of it as well, was providing that contrast. But this, for me, in Percy Jackson, reminds me a lot more of Chronicles of Narnia, or even the likes of The Never-Ending Story and like Willow and kind of stories like that from my childhood. And it's clearly designed to capture children's imagination and then bring you into this expansive world, rather than kind of trying to be good for children, yes, like Harry Potter was, but also kind of interesting for adults and kind of thematically daring. This is very much a kid's story, and it makes me wish that I was a kid to be able to kind of read and experience these stories for the first time, when I think I'd appreciate them most. And that aspect as well, also on the flip side, kind of holds me back from absolutely adoring it too and instantly putting it into my pantheon of favorite TV shows, because instead of connecting with me on this deep emotional level, I kind of feel more like I would connect with this if I was younger. If I was a kid, this would be right up my alley. But I still enjoy it, and that's not a slight. The story is kind of led by Jackson's creator, Rick Riordan, who made this more out of anger and frustration at how he felt that the movie adaptations missed the mark totally. It's really well told, with some excellent performances and innovative blends, along with the more traditional young fantasy beats of the kind of movies that it makes me nostalgic for. So you have a bit of the old school, but also you have ways that it's kind of pushing the story forward, even like the editing, even the way, like there's little things, even the way when the credits air, and they show here's what's coming up next week, they show you little glances instead of actually kind of giving you any plot, which gets you excited. And it's really smooth and just a well-told storyline. For me, if you feel like this might even be remotely up your alley, or if you're like, I like stories like this, but I'm not sure if Percy Jackson is really grabbing me. And for me, a large part of it was just the name Percy Jackson sounds like shit fanfic as well. Like, no offense, but it did, and it put me off for the longest time. But if you feel like this might be something you enjoy, or you enjoy serious, similar stories, I'd really recommend this one. Couple of shows now that I got a chance to catch up on that I just have never got around to beforehand, which Christmas is always handy for doing so. First one I want to talk about is Only Murders in the Building. I'm 2 seasons in, and this feels like a show to me. And I know that it gets rave reviews, and the people that love it love it. So I'm kind of wondering if I'm missing out. But my impression of the first 2 seasons, and again, season 3 may have knocked it out of the park and proved me totally wrong and make me eat my words here, because, and I'd like it to do so, but it feels like this is a show that's operating more on goodwill rather than quality. And look, I get it. I want this show to succeed. Steve Martin and Martin Short are two of my favorite comics, and it's really nice to spend time with them in this format, which is why, look, I think you can tell I'm probably not going to give it a glowing review like a lot of other people have, but I will still keep watching as a result, because there are some genuine laughs here too, and really kind of family friendly comedy, which I'm very open towards. Like, I even like the likes of Young Sheldon, which is like an old school, kind of gentle comedy throwback to previous days. And this has a lot of those same elements, while also trying to modernize it in certain ways, such as, for example, if you don't know, the plot is about people who are obsessed with a murder podcast starting their own podcast themselves. And the format and idea is fun. So as well, all of those things combined, as well as a lot of the stars and cameos that they get throughout, is probably enough to keep me watching. But there are some, for me, fundamental flaws that, again, I'm hoping but not optimistic that season 3 will have fixed. Selena Gomez being the main one. For me, she just doesn't work here. She's not funny enough to keep up with the likes of Martin Short, Steve Martin, and Tina Fey, who's also a series regular. And the dynamic with her, Short, and Martin as a group just isn't believable in any way. And it feels like this was a show that was kind of insecure about putting on a show with aging comedians at its core. So they thought to themselves, we need to add someone who's cool with the kids. And then they just landed on Selena Gomez, and there she is. And I'm sorry, but she's not a great actress for me. So again, I just, that element of it, I'm just not into. Only Murders in the Building is fine, but don't go out of your way here if you haven't caught up. It's not something you really need to, or not something I think anyone's going to ever regret missing. The second season in particular for me was really convoluted, and it reeked of a show that kind of didn't plan after their first season, even though they did end on the cliffhanger. So they kind of just brought everyone back and just tried to style it out and make it work. Another show that I caught up on at the recommendation of Kev Keane, who called it out on our 2023 On the Box show, was one of his favorite shows of last year, is the Netflix comedy show I Think You Should Leave with Tim Robinson. And what I like about this show, if you haven't seen it first and foremost, is the length and the format. Basically, this is a skit comedy show. So again, there's no plot here or anything like that. It's sketches. You could, in theory, watch the episodes in any order and still follow along. And I absolutely love having 15 to 20-minute shows, which is right where this episode length lands, to watch over dinner in particular midweek. You know, when you're having your meal, you don't want to get stuck into an hour-long TV show. You just want to watch something nice and light, and you don't really want to care too much about the plot, or you don't want to kind of rush watching it either. You want to keep it there for when you need it, to try and keep up with everyone else. Tim Robinson's comedy, though, is a bit hit and miss for me, if I'm being honest. In theory, I love silly, but clever and relatable comedy. So Conan O'Brien, for me, is the absolute GOAT when it comes to this. So in theory, it should be something I love, because that's where it really gets its trade. And that's where sketch comedy is kind of at its finest. They're like, sometimes though, for me, he'll literally just scream the joke. And I tried watching this with my girlfriend recently, and that aspect of it, when I was watching, you know, when you're introducing something to someone and you're watching it then through their eyes and watching their reactions, and that aspect to me really didn't work, because again, it's kind of like, you know, you get the joke and you understand it, and then like I said, I'm not joking, he literally starts screaming it at you. There are some great skits, though, thinking in particular of like when Stephen Young was in it, and they've some great celebrity cameos here as well. Like there was a skit about him not wiping when he went to have a shit, the Baby of the Year contest, Honk If You're Horny, or the Mega Money quiz with the character they had, Chunky, not figuring out what his job was or what he was there to do. Those all gave me big laughs, and there was a lot of big laughs here. But again, like I said, it is hit and miss. I'm going to keep this in the rotation because it's such an easy, quick watch, and it hits enough to justify the very little effort it requires. So season 4, I'm more than up for it. I think you should leave. Again, if it sounds like it's up your alley, go give it a watch, because it's an easy watch, 15-minute episodes. But if it doesn't, and it's something that you don't have the time for, you're not missing much for my money either. I'm also delighted with the returns of my reality TV appointments in the likes of Dragon's Den, which for me, 21 seasons in, somehow has only gone from strength to strength. And I put that down to the younger dragons of the likes of Stephen Bartlett, who is such an amazing find for this show. I'm a big fan of his work. And Sarah Davis, obviously, who's been there for a few years now. But they've also retained the old school dragons that make the show tick, in Peter Jones and Deborah Meaden. While you also have Tucker Sullivan, also playing the crotchety, slightly out of touch dragon role that the likes of Duncan Bannatyne used to inhabit to perfection. The one thing that I kind of worry about with Dragon's Den is this week's episode in particular will have celebrity dragons. So you have Gary Neville. I don't want this show to get gimmicky. I think the show format just works perfectly for what it is. People are always going to have new business ideas. It's a big show. So I'm happy kind of just keeping it simple. And I really hope that the celebrity aspect doesn't come across too gimmicky and isn't something that they kind of start to lean on to keep things fresh. I don't think this needs freshening up. What I'm also a big fan of is, and this is strange because it is a show I like, but The Apprentice, for the past couple of years, has gone back to back with Dragon's Den. I'm actually really okay with this because on Thursday nights, for whatever reason, I think just the way scheduling worked out for the past few years, it's been Dragon's Den at 8, The Apprentice at 9, and then First Dates Ireland at 9:30. It was always a real stress for me because I like to watch these shows and tweet about them as well at the same time. And it was always kind of a stress for me that The Apprentice and First Dates kind of overlapped and so on. So I'm actually glad The Apprentice is not paired up with Dragon's Den anymore, and I believe that they're coming back for a new series, which I'm going to watch whenever it comes out. Anyway, speaking of First Dates, First Dates UK and Ireland are both back as a Tuesday and Thursday appointment viewing. Loving the fact that it's twice a week. You get the UK one Tuesday on Channel 4, the Irish one Thursday on RTE. First Dates UK randomly and unannounced aired an old episode for some reason last week, despite the fact that even on their socials and their cast were kind of advertising to be a new episode. Very, very strange, but just a little thing there. And one thing it actually reminded me of was many of the older waiters and waitresses that they've had over the years that really helped build this show from the ground up. And that aspect to me in the UK show feels a little bare now, as only the kind of iconic and always amazing Fred is still there. You have Cece and you have Merlin, who, by the way, I want to wish all the best with his recent cancer diagnosis. I really hope that it is a case that it was caught early, not too serious, and so on and so forth. But they're the only people remaining from the original, and they haven't really had anyone new really stepping up yet. And I think that's an important aspect of these shows. It's not the thing that you watch for or the main thing, but those benchmarks keep you interested as you go on. But the formula just works still, both here and with the new Irish version. From the absolutely cringeworthy Real Housewife of Cheshire a few weeks ago being certain that her date recognized her, and if you haven't seen it, he did not. And yes, it was awkward and cringeworthy, to the absolutely rage-inducing date on the Irish show a couple of weeks ago, where one lad was so rude to the other that it actually made the papers. You cannot go wrong with first dates, and I hope they still pull in the viewers on both, because it's great television that still just works, and I want to just see it go as long as possible. Lastly, I want to touch on the first real prestige TV offering of the year, being True Detective returning with its latest season called Night Country. Again, if you don't know True Detective, it's a series of mystery stories, usually with A-listers cast. The first season had Matthew McConaughey and, oh my God, I'm blanking on the other guy now. I apologize. But you've had, like, yeah, so many A-listers throughout the years. Colin Farrell was in it at one stage and so on. But this year you have the first episode aired only this week on Sky. But so far, after one episode, I'm loving what I'm seeing. The casting is a little bit against the norm, as Jodie Foster is the only real name attached to it, but she is more than able to hold it down as the lead detective Danvers. Well, already I'm loving what I'm seeing from Relative Unknown, Callie Rice, who's been parachuted into the co-lead as Navarro, but seems right at home and able to keep up with Foster's every move. And by the way, Jodie Foster is having a career-defining performance in an already stellar career as well. It is phenomenal. I am loving just watching her cook already. She had me from the word go with this. It's the first season without the original creator, Nick Pizzolatto, at the helm of it. He's kind of stepped back into an executive producer role because he's working on some other stuff. And you have Issa Lopez taking the reins of showrunner here, but already it seems to be right at home and setting up for a really strong season. I love the nighttime setting of Alaska for maximum headfuckery and kind of mystery, and the mystical elements that seem to be at play have echoes of the likes of Yellow Jackets in the best possible way, while it also retains the gravitas stakes that we're used to with this show. I'm going to check back in as the series develops, but True Detective Night Country, one episode in, so far, so good.